So I started getting invited to camps at the
Hmm.
Institute of Sport, which is in a city called Canberra. So I'd fly
Hmm.
up and get to attend these camps.
That's for U.S. Listeners. That's the capital of Australia. So
Yes,
somewhere
yeah,
in between Sydney and Melbourne, kind of.
yeah, ish, yeah. And in those days, this is before the Sydney
Hmm.
Olympics, if you wanted I guess, the golden ticket to get to the
Hmm.
Sydney Olympics in rowing, then the best way to do that was to be based at the Australian Institute of Sport. And they had one spot there for a female cox. And so there I am going on these camps and then flying back to Melbourne to go to university and keep these various other aspects of life alive. And I was offered this one spot to the AIS to be their cox. And I think I was 22 at the time, and I decided to turn it down. Now, at the time, my thinking was, and I look back and I think, well, I was coming up against every camp, I was coming up against other coxes, and I would see them come to a camp and they'd last a few days. And my version of it is they'd be spat out the other side and you never see them again. So I think at the time, only 22, I had this sense that I wasn't ready. And if I wasn't ready, I'd just be spat out of the system and that'd be it. But you can imagine the head coach's response when this young, his words, arrogant 22-year-old turns down the ticket to the Olympics, basically. And so I was sent back to Melbourne, tail between my legs, and that was it. I think, a lot of people said to me they thought they'd never hear of me again in the rowing world.
Because they're
At
thinking, go ahead.
in the vernacular of Beyond the Crucible, that's your crucible moment. That moment
Mm,
right there. You're
mm-hmm,
invited, right? You're invited to be on the team, and you
mm-hmm,
say, "I don't know that I'm ready," and they don't care why you're not ready. They just sort of put a label on you, and
mm,
you go back, as you said, with your tail between your legs. That was. You realize perhaps later that was a crucible moment for you.
mm,
How did you handle that? Because
mm,
your career obviously didn't end there. So you
no.
handled it in a very proactive way, I think.
I did. So I had a couple of months where I focused on my university, and I think, was telling myself this story that, oh, it's fine, I'll find some interesting career whilst I'm studying
Hmm.
statistics at university type of thing. And it was a couple of months later, I had this real physical, I remember this physical response that it's time, I'm ready, and I want that spot. So it was a really short time frame. And I rang the head coach up at the Australian Institute of Sport. And I don't remember what I said. I have this vision of saying, "Da, have you waited? I'm here." I don't think it was like that, but yeah, I'm ready. Have you waited?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And not surprisingly, he had no interest. So being told no at that point. So the previous one was my choice. This time,
Right.
someone else was saying no. So my response then, I knew that the national championships were coming up, the rowing nationals. I knew that the Australian Institute of Sport women in their eight were going to be pretty much the Australian team, and I also knew that they had never been beaten at the nationals.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, I'll just put a boat together and beat them. And so I literally cold called these names of these women in Victoria, my state,
Uh-huh.
and introducing myself. Most of them didn't know who I was. And it turned out that a number of us had a common interest, and that was to beat that crew. And so I was really, really lucky that I was able to pull together this fabulous women's eight, mixed abilities, but some straight off the Atlanta Olympics, others up and coming. Most had felt frustrated, even burnt by the AIS, the Australian Institute of Sport, at one
Hmm.
time. So there was this desire to beat them. And I, bribed my way or influenced my way into borrowing a boat from a school and borrowing oars and begging my parents for the plane ticket to get to the nationals to race. Anyway, long story cut short, we got there. We didn't have a training row. We jumped in the boat on the day to race them. and, rowed up to what we call the starting blocks, so the start line.
Yeah.
Really windy day, really crazy windy day. And when you're in rowing, as you would know, Warwick, you need to back your boat into the starting line.
Right.
And the Australian Institute of Sport boat were up to their third attempt and they just were not backing it in.
Yeah.
And I arrogantly zipped up there based on my years of rowing in windy Ballarat and zipped it into the starting pontoon. So we already had eyes on us.
Uh-huh.
And then came flying out, and in the end, we beat that crew by about 12 seconds, which in rowing in the world is
a lot. I mean, how many, what does that translate into boat lengths?
about 4 lengths of a women's 8. Yeah,
4
so it's a
lengths.
big mention.
I mean, that's a colossal win.